They did not plan for it. That much is certain. The avoidant does not arrive in connection with the intention of falling in love, does not enter the dynamic with the openness of someone who has decided that this is the season for genuine attachment. The entire orientation of the avoidance psychology is away from exactly that outcome, away from the specific vulnerability of genuine love, away from the stakes that real attachment creates, away from the particular exposure of having someone matter enough that their loss would constitute genuine devastation. And yet, it happens. Not often, not with everyone, not in the ordinary dynamics that the avoidant moves through with the practiced ease of someone whose defense has adequate protocols for managing the usual quality of human connection. But sometimes, in the specific conditions that the avoidant did not see coming, in the encounter with someone who arrived without the signals the defense was calibrated to detect and manage, someone who was simply themselves in a way that the defense had no adequate response to. The falling happened before the defense could mobilize adequately, not through the breach of a wall, through the irrelevance of it. The person was not trying to get past the defense, was not aware of the defense as the thing to navigate, was simply present in a way that made the defense beside the point, that created the conditions of genuine contact before the system had processed what was happening and deployed the appropriate management. By the time the avoidant recognized what had occurred, the recognition was already the evidence that it had occurred. The love was already there, already in the interior, already the thing that the subsequent management was attempting, with the characteristic insufficient success that genuine love produces, to reduce to something more comfortable. What the avoidant saw that produced this is not a single quality, not a characteristic that can be identified and listed as the variable responsible for the outcome. It is more textured than that, more specific to the encounter between this particular person and this particular avoidant in this particular moment of genuine contact. But there are qualities that appear with consistency across these encounters. Qualities that the avoidance defense has not developed adequate protocols for managing. Qualities that reach the interior before the filter intercepts them, not because they are powerful in the aggressive sense, but because they are genuinely, unstrategically present in a way that the filter was not designed to address. The first is the quality of genuine self-possession, not confidence as a performed quality, not the loud, self-announcing assurance of someone who needs the room to register their presence, the quieter thing, the specific, settled, internally sourced quality of someone who is simply at home in themselves, who does not require the external environment to confirm their worth or organize their sense of direction, who is present in the interaction without the interaction being the thing that determines their interior stability. The avoidance defense was built to manage people whose sense of self is in some way organized around external response. People who need the avoidance engagement to feel adequate. People whose presence carries the ambient pressure of someone whose interior stability is contingent on how the interaction unfolds. That contingency is what the defense manages most effectively. The pursuit, the need, the reaching toward the avoidant as the source of something the person requires for their own stability, all of that the defense handles with the practiced ease of long experience. Genuine self-possession has none of that contingency. The person is stable before the avoidant responds. Remains stable regardless of how the avoidant responds. Is present in the interaction from the complete, already sufficient, not requiring anything particular position of someone whose interior is genuinely their own rather than dependent on the dynamic's emotional output. The avoidant encounters that stability and something in the system pauses. The usual protocols are designed for the usual contingency. This is different, and different in the avoidance relational experience is rare enough to produce a quality of attention that the ordinary encounter does not generate. The second quality is genuine interest that does not perform itself. Most people who are interested in the avoidant communicate that interest in ways that the defense reads immediately and manages accordingly. The interest carries a specific quality of investment in a particular outcome, of caring how the avoidant receives the interaction, of wanting the engagement to go a certain way and being, however subtly, organized around producing that outcome. The genuine interest that reaches past the defense has a different quality. It is curious without being invested in a particular response to the curiosity. It engages with the avoidant as a genuinely interesting person without the engagement being organized around the production of connection as a goal. It asks questions that reflect actual wondering rather than strategic information gathering. It listens in a way that indicates the listening is genuinely for the sake of what might be heard, rather than for the sake of demonstrating attentiveness. That quality of genuine, non-invested interest is disarming in the specific sense that it gives the defense nothing to manage. The defense manages investment, manages need, manages the specific pressure of someone who wants something from the interaction and is orienting their behavior toward getting it. Genuine interest without investment does not have that pressure, does not give the defense the purchase it requires to deploy its usual response. The avoidant, in the presence of genuine non-invested interest, finds themselves actually talking, actually saying things that are more honest than what the defense usually permits, actually engaging with the substance of what is being asked, rather than the managed version of a response designed to maintain appropriate distance. The interest pulls something genuine out of the interior before the management intercepts the extraction. And that something genuine, that actual interior content that the genuine interest drew out, creates the conditions for the real contact that the defense was supposed to prevent. The avoidant said something real. The person received it genuinely. Something passed between them that was not the managed version of either person's presentation. That something is the beginning of what became love. The third quality is harder to name because it is less a specific characteristic and more a quality of being. It is the quality of someone who has genuinely sat with difficulty and come through it without being hardened by the coming through. Not the performance of resilience, not the confident narrative of someone who has turned their struggles into the proof of their strength. Not the curated version of having been through something that produces the polished story of the lesson learned and the growth achieved. The genuine version, which tends to be quieter, less organized into a neat narrative, more honest about the fact that some things genuinely cost something, and the cost was real and the coming through was not clean or triumphant, but simply what happened. The continuation of the person despite the difficulty, with the specific texture of someone who is more honestly themselves for having been through it rather than better at presenting themselves. The avoidant recognizes this quality without always being able to name what they are recognizing. Recognizes it in the specific way that someone who has spent significant time with difficulty of their own recognizes it in another. Not through the announced credentials of suffering, but through the particular quality of presence that genuine difficulty, genuinely metabolized, tends to produce. It produces depth that is not performed, warmth that is not managed, the specific quality of someone who has touched enough of the reality of human experience to be genuinely present to it in others without needing to manage the contact with it. That quality is what the avoidant fell toward. Not the difficulty itself, not the story of it, but the specific quality of person that the genuine metabolizing of it produced. The fourth quality, and this is the one that tends to be most unexpected in its impact on the avoidant, is the quality of being genuinely seen by someone who is not using the seeing for anything. Most people who see the avoidant clearly, who perceive the defended interior, the fear underneath the self-sufficiency, the genuine depth behind the managed surface, do something with the seeing. Use it as the basis for a particular approach. Organize their engagement around the insight. Attempt to reach the interior through the knowledge of what the interior contains. The person who sees clearly and does nothing strategic with the seeing, who simply holds the accurate perception with the same quality of non-invested genuine interest that has been described, produces something entirely different in the avoidant. The experience of being known without the knowing being used. That experience is genuinely rare for the avoidant. Most relational history involves either not being seen clearly, the surface accepted as the whole, the managed presentation received as the actual person, or being seen and having the seeing become the thing that is navigated toward or away from. The seeing as leverage, however unconsciously, the knowing as the basis of an approach. To be seen accurately and have the seeing simply held, not acted on, not deployed, not converted into the foundation of a strategy for reaching the defended interior, produces something in the avoidant that almost nothing else produces. The specific, unfamiliar, slightly disorienting experience of being known and not being managed in relation to the knowing. Of being seen and having the seeing be simply the honest recognition of another person, rather than the intelligence gathered for the management of an approach. That experience, for the avoidant, is the closest available thing to genuine safety. Not comfort. Genuine safety is not the same as comfort. But the actual, felt, interior sense that the person in front of them is not organizing their behavior around the management of the avoidance psychology, is simply there, seeing clearly, present genuinely, interested honestly. The love that the avoidant fell into was the love of someone who had never felt that specific quality of being known without being managed, and found in this person its first genuine occurrence. None of these qualities were deployed. That remains the most important thing to say about all of them. They were not assembled strategically, were not identified as the variables most likely to reach the avoidant's defended interior, and then deliberately expressed in the avoidant's presence for the purpose of producing the outcome of genuine attachment. They were simply the genuine expression of a person who had done enough real interior work to have arrived at these qualities as the natural, unself-conscious expression of who they actually are. The self-possession was not performed, it was genuine. The interest was not strategic, it was actual. The depth was not curated, it was earned. The seeing was not deployed. It was honest. And the love that the avoidant fell into unexpectedly, the love that arrived before the defense could mobilize adequately, that established itself in the interior before the management could reduce it to something more comfortable, that has been refusing ever since to comply with the instruction to become smaller than what it actually is. That love was the natural, inevitable response of a defended interior encountering the rarest available thing. Someone who was simply, genuinely, without strategy or performance, or the specific pressure of wanting something from the encounter, completely themselves. That is what the avoidant fell in love with. Not a technique, not a quality engineered for effect. You. Simply, completely, without apology or management or the need for confirmation. You. And the love, however the behavior has or has not expressed it, however the pattern has or has not allowed it to become what it deserved to become, however the gap between the interior and the adequate expression of it has or has not been closed by the work that closing it requires. The love is real. It arrived unexpectedly. It found something in you that the defense had no adequate response to. And it has not, despite the management's best efforts, become smaller than what it actually is. That is the truth of it. Held honestly, without inflation, without deflation. Simply the accurate, complete, neither more nor less than what it is truth of what happened when the avoidant saw what they saw in you, and fell, without planning to, without being able to stop it once it began. Into something real. The answer that lives in the person's own interior is not always immediately audible. That is worth acknowledging honestly. The clarity that has been described throughout this conversation, the clear-eyed, accurately informed, genuinely self-referencing position from which genuine choices can be made, that clarity is real, and it is also not always continuously available at the same volume. There are moments when the avoidant's unexpected, genuine love is the loudest thing in the interior. When the specific quality of what was present in the connection, the real contact, the genuine moments, the specific texture of being with someone who fell in love with what they saw in you without planning to, when all of that is more present than the honest assessment of what the behavioral expression of that love has been. Those moments are not failures of clarity, they are the honest expression of genuine feeling persisting alongside the accurate picture. The feeling does not switch off because the picture is complete. The love that the person has for the avoidant, the real, genuine, this was not nothing love, continues to be real regardless of the accuracy of the assessment of what the avoidant's love has and has not produced in behavior. Holding both of those things, the genuine feeling and the accurate assessment, is the ongoing practice. Not a practice that completes itself, not a practice that arrives at a permanent, stable, never again disrupted position of clear-eyed equanimity. A practice, daily, renewed. Sometimes easier than other times. The days when it is harder tend to have specific triggers, not always obvious ones. Sometimes the trigger is the peripheral signal, the reach without reason, the quality of the unguarded response, the specific texture of something that arrived from the avoidant carrying the unmistakable quality of genuine missing. Those signals, accurately read, still carry emotional weight that the accurate reading does not neutralize. The weight is the genuine feeling responding to the genuine missing on the other side. Two real things meeting across the distance the behavior has maintained. Sometimes the trigger is not the avoidant at all. It is something in the ordinary texture of the person's own life that creates the specific context in which the loss is most felt. The specific kind of moment that would have been different with the avoidant present. The kind of experience that the genuine connection would have nourished in a way that its absence makes quietly apparent. Not the dramatic reminder, the quiet one, the one that arrives in an unremarkable moment and carries, briefly and specifically, the weight of what is not there. Those triggers are not the evidence that the reclamation is incomplete. They are the honest expression of genuine loss persisting in the way genuine loss does, not continuously at full volume, but present in the moments when the specific texture of the absence is most precisely felt. They do not require management, do not require the immediate redirection of attention to what is present rather than what is absent. They require the same honest, non-narrative, patient reception that everything in this dynamic has required. Feel it. Let it be what it is. Do not convert it into the evidence of something larger than it is, into the proof that the reclamation was not real, or the clarity was not genuine, or the forward motion was performed rather than actual. It is the grief touching the present moment briefly and then continuing its own process at its own pace. The avoidant who fell in love unexpectedly when they saw what they saw in you, that person is also living with something that does not resolve cleanly. The love is real in their interior, and the architecture that was supposed to prevent exactly that kind of genuine love is now containing something it was not built for and is not managing successfully. That condition does not improve through the passage of time alone, does not resolve simply because the distance is maintained, or the exit strategy narrative is sustained, or the reclassification project keeps being attempted. The love in the interior does not reduce on its own timeline, does not comply with the architecture's preference for something smaller and more manageable, persists with the specific, inconvenient, not going anywhere quality of genuine feeling that has established itself at the depth that the person's authentic presence reached. What resolves it, or rather, what has the potential to resolve it in the direction of genuine expression rather than permanent suppression, is the interior work. The genuine, sustained, supported engagement with what the architecture is and why it was built, and what maintaining it continues to cost. The honest reckoning with the gap between the love in the interior and the behavior the architecture produces. The gradual, non-linear, genuinely difficult process of developing the capacity to let the love become what it deserves to become, visible, expressed, present in the ordinary days in the form that the person who produced it deserves to receive. That process is the avoidance to undertake or not undertake, on their own terms, in their own time, motivated by whatever internal conditions eventually make the cost of the architecture feel greater than the cost of changing it. There is something worth naming about the specific quality of love that falls unexpectedly, the love that was not planned for, not sought, not the product of a deliberate opening toward connection. The love that arrived through the irrelevance of the defense rather than its breach. That arrived because someone was simply, genuinely, completely themselves in a way that the architecture had no protocol for. That kind of love tends to be more durable in the interior than the love that arrives through more gradual, more consciously managed opening. Not because all love is not real, but because the unexpected love, the love that established itself before the architecture could mobilize, has a different relationship to the defense than love that arrived through the defense's deliberate, if partial, lowering. Love that arrived through partial, deliberate opening can be managed back, can be reduced by the architecture in the same direction the opening went, because the opening was always subject to the architecture's control. The architecture opened and the architecture can close. Love that arrived before the architecture mobilized is not subject to the same control. It got in before the gate was operational. And the gate, however thoroughly it reasserts itself in the behavioral expression, cannot retroactively remove something that established itself in the interior before the gate was in place. This is why the avoidant who fell in love unexpectedly tends to carry the love with a persistence that surprises even them. Why the reclassification attempts fail. Why the exit strategy narrative requires ongoing maintenance rather than settling into genuine conviction. Why the love keeps being what it is despite the sustained pressure of the architecture's preference for something more manageable. The love got in before the management could prevent it, and the management, however sophisticated, does not have adequate tools for removing something that is already in the interior rather than approaching from the outside. That durability is real. It is also, in its current form, the interior's private reality rather than the behavioral reality the person deserves to experience. The durability of the love in the avoidance interior does not translate automatically into the durability of its expression and behavior, does not mean the showing up will be consistent, does not mean the ordinary days will reflect what the interior contains. The durability of the interior love and the adequacy of its behavioral expression are two different things, and the distinction between them, which has been the central concern of this conversation from its beginning, does not dissolve because the interior love is unexpectedly durable. What would dissolve it is the work, the genuine closing of the gap between what the interior contains and what the behavior produces. The development of the capacity that the unexpected love arrived in the interior of someone who did not yet possess. The becoming, through genuine sustained effort, of the person whose behavior matches the love that has been in the interior all along. Whether that becoming happens is genuinely unknown. It is the most honestly open question in this entire dynamic. Not unknown in the sense of truly random. The avoidant's own choices, engagement with the interior work, development of genuine capacity for expression, these are the variables that determine the outcome. But unknown from the perspective of the person who produced the love, because those variables are entirely internal to the avoidant and not visible or controllable from the outside. The person lives with that genuine unknowing, not as the organizing concern of the interior, but as the honest, patient, clear-eyed acknowledgement of a situation that has not yet resolved into the clarity of a known outcome. The avoidant loves genuinely in the interior. The behavioral expression has been insufficient. The capacity for adequate expression has not yet been demonstrated over the ordinary days. Whether it will be developed remains genuinely open. That openness is held, without the imposition of premature closure in either direction, without the inflation of the interior love into the evidence of imminent behavioral change, without the deflation of it into irrelevance because the behavioral expression has been inadequate, just held, honestly, as the actual condition of the actual situation. And in the holding, in the honest, patient, non-narrative presence, in the genuine complexity of what is actually true, the person's own life continues, genuinely, fully, without the holding of the complexity requiring the suspension of the genuine forward motion. The complexity is real, and it is not the primary concern of the interior. The primary concern of the interior is the life itself. The actual, present, genuinely inhabited, fully deserving of complete presence life that belongs to the person regardless of what the avoidant does with the unexpected love that established itself before the architecture could prevent it. That life is where the answer lives, where the genuine choices are made, where the person who produced the unexpected love in someone who did not plan for it, who was simply genuinely completely themselves, continues to be simply genuinely completely themselves, in their own life, in the ordinary days, that belong, fully and without condition, to them. The avoidant fell in love unexpectedly, and the person they fell in love with continues to live their life completely. That is not the ending, it is the ongoing. The genuine, forward-moving, fully inhabited ongoing of a person who has always been, and continues to be, exactly worth falling in love with, without needing to do anything to deserve it. Simply by being what they genuinely are. That has always been enough. It remains enough. Now. And in whatever comes next. The ongoing is not a dramatic thing. That is perhaps the most honest and most grounding thing that can be said about it. The genuine, forward-moving life of someone who has been through the specific education of this dynamic does not announce itself as transformation, does not arrive with the emotional intensity of the significant moments that punctuated the dynamic itself. It is quieter than that, more textured, more genuinely ordinary in the way that actual life, as opposed to the heightened emotional experience of a complicated dynamic, tends to be genuinely ordinary. The ordinariness is not a diminishment, it is the actual substance of a life being lived rather than managed. The difference between the two is felt in the quality of the engagement with the days, in whether the days feel like the container of genuine experience or like the background against which the real drama of the avoidant dynamic was playing out. The dynamic gave the days a particular kind of charge, a constant low-level significance derived from the ongoing question of where things stood, what the signals meant, what the avoidant was doing with the love that had established itself unexpectedly in their interior. Without that charge, the days returned to their actual quality, which is neither the heightened intensity of the dynamic nor the flat emptiness that the transition period can initially feel like. It is the genuine, specific, particular quality of an actual life, with actual content, an actual people, an actual engagement with the things that genuinely matter to the person living it. Finding that quality, recognizing it as the thing rather than as the lesser alternative to the intensity of the dynamic, is part of the ongoing work of genuine reclamation. Because the intensity of the avoidant dynamic, for all its cost, was genuinely felt. Was the experience of something that mattered being in question, of genuine feeling being activated, of the specific aliveness that high emotional stakes tend to produce? And the absence of that intensity in the genuinely inhabited ordinary life can feel, initially, like a reduction rather than a restoration. It is not a reduction. The aliveness that genuine emotional stakes produce is real, but it is not the only form of genuine aliveness available. It is the form that conflict and uncertainty and the constant management of an insufficient dynamic produce. The aliveness of something always slightly at stake, always slightly unresolved, always requiring the engaged attention of someone who is trying to read the situation accurately. There are other forms of aliveness. The specific quality of genuine absorption in meaningful work. The particular aliveness of a real conversation with someone who is actually present to it. The specific pleasure of inhabiting a skill or a creative pursuit, or an intellectual engagement with the full quality of attention it deserves. The quiet, unremarkable aliveness of a day that was genuinely lived, that had real content and real engagement and real presence to the actual texture of its hours. These forms of aliveness do not carry the charge of the dynamic, do not produce the specific heightened quality of experience that genuine emotional stakes generate, but they are more sustainable, more genuinely nourishing, more the actual substance of a life that is worth living, rather than the intense but ultimately depleting charge of a situation that is always slightly unresolved. The person who produced unexpected love in an avoidant, when they saw what they saw, the self-possession, the genuine non-invested interest, the depth that was earned rather than curated, the seeing that was honest rather than deployed, that person did not acquire those qualities through the avoidant dynamic. Those qualities were present before the dynamic, were the product of the person's own genuine interior work, their own real engagement with their own life, their own honest metabolizing of whatever difficulty and experience produced the depth and groundedness that the avoidance defense had no protocol for. The dynamic encountered those qualities, was affected by them, fell in love with them unexpectedly, without planning to, before the architecture could mobilize adequately. But the qualities themselves were not produced by the dynamic, were not generated by the experience of loving the avoidant, or navigating the avoidance behavior, or developing the psychological understanding of avoidant attachment. They predated the dynamic, and they survive it. They are the person's own, independent of the avoidance response to them, independent of whether the unexpected love they produced ever finds its way to adequate behavioral expression. This is worth sitting with, not as the abstract reassurance that the person is valuable regardless of the avoidance behavior. That has been said throughout, and is true but can become a formula if repeated without genuine examination. But as the specific concrete recognition that what the avoidant fell in love with is not something the dynamic gave the person. It is something the person brought to the dynamic. And what they brought, they take with them when the dynamic ends or transforms or settles into whatever it actually becomes. The self-possession goes with them. The genuine non-invested interest, the capacity to be curious about another person without organizing the curiosity around a particular relational outcome, that goes with them. The depth that genuine difficulty genuinely metabolized produces, that goes with them. The specific quality of seeing clearly without using the seeing strategically, that goes with them. These are the person's genuine qualities, not performances, not strategic deployments, the actual expression of who they are when they are most genuinely themselves. And they continue to express themselves in every space the person inhabits, not as a deliberate demonstration of qualities designed to produce a particular effect, but as the natural, unself-conscious expression of someone who has done enough real work on themselves to be genuinely present, without the management that most people deploy as relational armor. That presence will continue to have its effect in the world, will continue to reach things that were built to remain unreached, will continue to produce the specific, involuntary, genuine impact of authentic presence in the people who encounter it, not only in avoidance. In anyone who has the interior sensitivity to register the genuine thing when it appears, some of those people will have the capacity to meet it adequately, will be far enough along in their own genuine interior development that the impact of encountering genuine, authentic presence does not primarily activate the fear of what genuine attachment makes possible, but rather the recognition of something worth moving towards with genuine commitment and genuine, sustained effort. Those people exist. They are not theoretical. They are the people who have done comparable interior work to the work the person has done, who have metabolized their own difficulty honestly, who have developed their own capacity for genuine presence, who have arrived at the specific quality of being genuinely themselves without the management that protects against the exposure of the actual self. When two people who have both genuinely arrived at themselves encounter each other, when the authentic presence meets the authentic presence, when the genuine non-invested interest meets the genuine non-invested interest, when the depth meets the depth, what is produced is not the complicated, signal interpreting, interior reading engagement of the avoidant dynamic. It is something simpler, more direct. The specific, relatively uncomplicated recognition of two people who are genuinely compatible at the level that actually matters. The level of genuine interiority, of having actually arrived at themselves rather than having performed the qualities that genuine arrival produces. That encounter is not guaranteed, is not the automatic destination of someone who has done the interior work and reclaimed themselves and is living the genuine, fully inhabited life that the reclamation makes possible. The world does not straightforwardly reward genuine interior development with the immediate presentation of someone equally developed. But the genuine interior development does change the conditions of encounter, changes what the person is available to notice and to be genuinely interested in, changes what registers as the compelling, worth engaging with quality of connection versus what registers as the familiar texture of a dynamic that will require the interpretive labor of someone who is working harder than the connection is returning. The person who has been through the avoidant dynamic and has genuinely integrated its education carries a specific discernment that they did not have before. Not the defensive discernment of someone who is protecting against repetition. The genuine discernment of someone who has developed the perceptual sensitivity to feel the difference between the real thing and its various approximations. That discernment does not require effortful application, does not require the deliberate assessment of each new connection against the checklist of what genuine reciprocal presence looks like. It operates as the natural, body-level, felt-before-thought registration of what is actually present in an encounter versus what is being performed or managed. The real thing feels different. The person now knows how it feels, not from theory, from experience. From having lived in the proximity of genuine feeling that could not find adequate behavioral expression, and having felt in that proximity both what was real and what was missing, both the genuine thing in the interior and the insufficient expression of it in behavior, both the love that was there and the showing up that was not. That dual knowledge of what genuine feeling feels like from the inside and what inadequate behavioral expression feels like from the receiving end is the specific, practically valuable education of having loved an avoidant genuinely and come through the dynamic with the self intact. The self intact is the thing, not the same as before, more developed, more honestly self-knowing, more accurately calibrated to the actual evidence of what a connection is providing, rather than the hopeful interpretation of what it might become. But intact in the ways that matter. The capacity for genuine love is intact. The depth is intact. The specific quality of authentic presence that produced the unexpected love in the avoidant is intact. The self-possession, the genuine interest, the earned depth, the honest seeing, all intact. These are not things the dynamic damaged, they are things the dynamic tested, put under the specific pressure of being offered into conditions that could not adequately receive them. And they held, remained genuinely what they were, despite the pressure of the insufficient conditions. Did not become smaller or more defended, or more managed in response to the dynamic's characteristic demand for the reduction of authentic presence to something more comfortable for the defended interior. They remained, and they remain, in the person, living the genuine ordinary life, that is fully, completely, without condition or reservation, theirs. The avoidant fell in love unexpectedly when they saw what they saw. What they saw has not gone anywhere. It is here. In the person who carries it not as something they do, but as something they simply are. And that something, genuine, intact, continuing to be exactly what it is in the genuine ordinary days of a life fully inhabited, is more than enough. It is, in fact, everything that matters. Not for the avoidant's love, for the person's own genuine life, which continues, fully, right now, as it always has, as it always will. Regardless of what the unexpected love in the avoidant's interior eventually becomes, or does not become, the person's life does not wait for that answer. It is already the answer to a different question. The only question that was ever genuinely theirs to answer. What do I want my life to be? And the answer is this: genuine, fully inhabited, completely present, in the ordinary days. That are the whole of it.